So what did you think of Billy the Kid's grave?
That's pretty cool. I liked the fact when you walk into the cemetery, the first grave you come to is somebody who was shot by William H. Bonney. 50 feet behind him is William H. Bonney.
That is kind of ironic. No, it's really kind of out there, away from the town, almost 7 miles south of the town. I'm kind of disappointed that the museums were closed and that we couldn't go into Fort Sumner. But it is winter time and it is the holidays. So they probably just don't get the traffic, even though when we were there were quite a few people that showed up in and out while we were there.
License plates from different states.
Yeah, people came from all over to see him on their holiday vacations. So, you know, he died over 130 years ago, and people are still visiting his grave. Okay, so we are basically out in the middle of nowhere.
It's the home of Billy the Kid, man.
Except for home of Billy the Kid. Okay, so we're looking for signs for Old Fort Sumner.
Onto US 60.
So pretty much everything's closed down. It's like a ghost town.
Dave's Grocer's open.
Fort Sumner Historical Site. We turn left.
Turn left.
So we're going east. So you want to find the signs that say Old Fort Sumner. There is a place that is the Billy the Kid Museum, but it's privately owned, and what we're looking for is the actual Fort Sumner site. So there's one of those signs right there on the right. It's the Billy the Kid Museum and Gift Shop. That's the privately owned place that also supposedly has a replica of his, that's the museum right there that has a replica of his graveyard. But that's not what we're looking for. We're looking for
Fort Sumner Cemetery.
the Fort Sumner Cemetery. Okay, so we went about 3.5 miles down this road, and now we're starting to see some signage letting us know that we're coming up to it.
Actually, it doesn't say a damn thing about Billy the Kid anymore.
No, it doesn't. So it looks like we're on New Mexico Highway 272. We're at the gravesite of Billy the Kid. Do note when you come out here that the actual Fort Sumner historical site is only open certain days of the week. Right now it's Wednesday through Sunday. Of course, we're here on a Monday. I had no idea. I usually look those things up, but we're pretty much out in an area that's out in the middle of nowhere. His gravesite is not in town. It's actually very quaint, very nice out here, but we are going to walk around and take a look. There's a building right here when you pull into the parking lot. It's a nice parking lot that you can park in. And there's picnic tables out here too. If you want to pack a picnic, you are out in kind of nowhere land, so you have to go back in town to eat at a restaurant, things of that nature, but we are definitely outside of town. So there is supposedly a fake grave in town that is quoted a replica. So his grave's just on the other side of the fence there. It's the cage looking thing there. He's had his headstone stolen many times, and so they had to encase his body and his grave in this cage looking thing. There it is right there. Not the sunniest day in the world. So his headstone had been stolen about 3 times.
That's his actual headstone.
So he's buried here with his friends that he was captured with. And this one right here is his, on the right here is his actual headstone. So many people have thrown money in to pay their respects. And then the bodies are encased in concrete. That's if they're really in this location. Somebody even threw a dollar bill in there. So there was some legal action a few years back about exhuming his grave to prove that he's really buried here, because there's theories that Pat Garrett said he shot him but really didn't, because he was having such a problems capturing and keeping him that he wanted to save face and buried somebody else here. But that was overturned because the town didn't want to lose the money they're making off of him being here. There's several other graves that are in here. So this is Lucien Maxwell. Lucien Maxwell, Fort Sumner, when the military pulled out, sold this property to Maxwell. And so that's why he is buried here, along with his family. So Peter Maxwell supposedly is the one that turned Billy in and ran off when Pat Garrett came to shoot him. And he was supposedly in Peter's house at the time. So the Sandoval's are buried in this area. You can see Billy's off on the side there.
Funny how the first thing you do when you walk in the cemetery, the guy was shot by
In the process of trying to find Polita's grave. She supposedly was having an affair with Billy, but that's not true. So Polita married somebody else, and there's been lies about the year that they got married because they were supposed to have had a love child. She was supposed to have a love child with Billy, and that's not true. She was even interviewed back in the 20s and said that was not true. The one thing about Polita's life is she was very Hispanic Mexican, and she could not really go anyplace by herself. She always had to have a chaperone. So before she was married, there was always somebody there. And she denied it, that she never had an affair with Billy the Kid, and there is no love child. Matter of fact, the person that was supposed to be the love child turns out to be her second child with her husband. Now, she ended up marrying a guy that was abusive, and she left him years later and came back here to Fort Sumner and stayed with her brother in her brother's house and her mom's. And then when they died, she ended up opening up a hotel nearby. She ended up dying penniless, which is kind of ironic because her father was, well-to-do. But she's buried, that's why she's buried here. She did leave the area when she got married and then came back when her husband was so abusive. But there was no affair, but when she was interviewed, she did say that she was enamored with him. And if he did like her, she probably would have be open to affections, quote unquote. So let's find Polita's grave. This is Les Maxwell's buried here, and some of the other Maxwell family. And Les was the mother and the matriarch of this property. and some of these are her grandkids. So buried here in this one headstone, so they're all in this area. You can see that there's some broken headstones all around. But Lux Maxwell was the mother, and Paulita, I've seen it spelled Paul and then Lita, and I've also seen it spelled Pablita, how it's spelled here. She is Paulita Maxwell, that was supposedly had an affair with Billy and his love child, which is not true. So she's buried here with her mom and the rest of her family. And they're right on to the south of Billy's grave. So there's quite a bit of open space where you don't see a whole lot of headstones. So you wonder how many headstones are missing. Now, there was a flood in this area shortly after Billy passed, and his original headstone was washed away. It was a wooden headstone. And then his other headstone, his new headstone, was stolen in the 30s, and it was recovered. And then his headstone was stolen again in the 80s and found in Huntington Beach, of all places. Now, I'm not really sure if this is the original replacement stone after the flood, but it's definitely not the original because, again, that was wood and was washed away in the flood. So you wonder how many headstones were washed away in that flood, because as you can see, there's not really much here except maybe about 20 grave headstones. Now, the latest headstone that I've seen in this graveyard is Silva, and he was buried here in 2004, so he's obviously one of the local families, because there is a plot here for the Silvas. So here's Peter's grave, and right behind him is a plaque with his mother Lutz and Paulita, his sister, and the rest of his family. And then he's right next to his dad. And Billy, of course, is in the cage, and his mate over there. At Lucien Maxwell's grave, and Lucien, if I'm pronouncing his name correctly, to be honest with you, he bought Fort Sumner, the property from the U.S. government when they pulled out of here in the late 60s. Fort Sumner was originally put together to round up the Apache and the Comanche that were in the area and incarcerate them. And so that's behind me. And when they pulled out, they sold the land to Maxwell. And his son Peter is one that he said that it was at Peter's house that Billy was captured and killed. And that they also, there's always been rumor that his daughter Paulita had an affair with Billy, but that's not true. Not only is there no historical fact backing that up, but even Paulita herself in an interview in 1920 said that that never happened. And there was supposed to be a love child between the two. And the person that they said was the love child, historians believe that it was an illegitimate child of Lucien Maxwell and a local Native American woman. And even they even claimed that one of Paulita's sons was the illegitimate child of Billy the Kid, but the person that they were saying was the illegitimate child was her second son, and he was born a long time after Billy was killed. Why we're here, everything seems to be closed up. There's a building over here that looked like it was once a museum, but I hear it closed in 2017. Not sure what's up with that. But there's nothing else out here except this graveyard. And then Fort Sumner, the actual fort site, is on the other side of this wall, but it's closed. So we're going to see, though, if we're able to at least walk through the site, or if the whole thing is closed. So let's go take a look. Kind of fun when you first come into the site. There's this wood headstone here, and it basically says that Joe here was shot by William Bonney, and I'm gonna kind of have to look that one up because I don't know, it's just carved into the wood. So that it's still here because, like I said, there was a flood in this area and it took away all the wood markers, including Billy the Kid's, who's William Bonney. And so that this is the only one that stood, I don't know. So there's Billy's grave over there in the cage, and this is Joe that was supposedly shot by him. So I'm not quite sure what's going on here with this building and why it's closed down. Maybe because it's off season. Chamber of Commerce Information System, point of interest.